During the first week of January 1998, Sonny Bono, the legendary singer-songwriter who rose to fame as one half of Sonny and Cher in the mid-60s before pivoting to a life in politics, took his family on a ski trip to Lake Tahoe. Sonny, along with his fourth wife Mary and the couple's two children, 9-year-old son Cesare and 6-year-old daughter Kiana, considered Tahoe a second home, particularly given the family's love of skiing and Sonny's close relationship with Bill Harrah, who famously owned a line of hotels and casinos in the area. On this particular trip, the Bonos were taking advantage of a break from his duties as a U.S. congressional representative from California and trying to fit in a little skiing before Sonny had to return to Palm Springs for a film festival. After several days in the mountains, the family went to Heavenly Ski Resort on January 5th for one more day on the slopes. Sonny was a very skilled skier and more than capable of handling himself on intermediate and even expert runs. He'd experienced some neck problems a few years earlier after he needed a surgery to remove a growth on his cervical vertebrae, but the pain was manageable and didn't restrict his mobility. But given his comfort on the mountain, Bono didn't wear a helmet, which wasn't entirely uncommon and in fact fairly consistent with the norms of the time. The conversation about the need for helmets on the ski slopes, however, had just taken on a renewed urgency in light of the news of the death of Michael Kennedy, son of the late Robert F. Kennedy, following a ski accident in Aspen, Colorado, just a few days earlier on December 31st, 1997. Kennedy, who was just 39 years old and not wearing a helmet at the time, had been playing football while on skis with his family members when he hit a tree and died. News of the tragedy prompted Sonny to discuss the topic of helmets, and Sonny even decided he'd finally relent, promising to get one before their next ski trip. But the next trip would never happen. Around midday, the family took the lift up to the Orion Run, a 2-kilometer intermediate blue square with a fairly well-groomed downhill path. Sonny took off first, followed by Cesare and Kiana, with Mary trailing behind to make sure the kids got down safely. At the start of the run, Cesare spun around and collided with Kiana, so Mary stopped to make sure everyone was okay before heading down the mountain. Perhaps not realizing the commotion behind him, Sonny sped down the path ahead, perhaps planning to meet up with the family at the bottom and reconvene before the next run. Sonny, however, never showed up. At first, the family thought nothing of it, spending some time looking for him but not worrying too much about his absence. It's common to lose your group while skiing, as skiers often take different routes and end up at different bases. After about 30 minutes, however, curiosity faded into outright panic when they couldn't locate Sonny at the base of the mountain or anywhere at the resort. Mary asked the ski patrol if there had been any reported accidents on Orion Slope, but none had been radioed in. And after waiting a little while, she and the kids decided to look for him themselves, taking the ski lift up the hill and scanning the slopes along the way. They did so several times but couldn't find any trace of Sonny. Mary recalled, quote, "The kids were so cold. They were crying. I said, okay, he had to have skied to the very bottom. That's what happened. He'll be waiting there for us." Finally, at around 4:30 p.m., Sonny was officially listed as a missing person, and the authorities began calling local buses, hoping he might have been led astray and just needed a ride back to the correct lodge. But none of it tracked with Sonny's familiarity with all the mountains in Lake Tahoe, and as more time passed, the situation got bleaker. As Mary frantically called friends and cooperated with the ski patrol, one officer remarked simply, "It doesn't look good." And less than 2 hours later, around 6 p.m., the sheriff and president of the ski resort told Mary the news she feared most. Sonny's body had been discovered on the mountain, and she was told he'd suffered a fatal collision with a tree off the main run. Sonny Bono was just 62 years old. I'm Derek Kaufman.
I'm Jason Beckerman.
And this is Last Days, Sonny Bono.
The shock of the news that Sonny's body had been discovered has remained a haunting memory for Mary Bono. Reflecting on his death many years later, Mary recounted how she begged the authorities to take her to see Sonny's body on the mountain, eventually loading onto a snowmobile for the morbid journey up the mountain. She said, quote, "It was the longest snowmobile ride, but I never wanted it to end. The minute I got there, I saw his feet and his legs, and I knew it was him." The coroner subsequently said Sonny's death after striking the tree had been nearly instantaneous, providing some solace that her husband had at least not suffered on the mountain for hours before being found. Nevertheless, Mary was then faced with the most difficult task of all, telling her two young children that their father was dead. Mary regrets the bluntness of her delivery of the terrible news, saying, quote, "I was in shock. I didn't have time to prepare or think about, how do I break this kind of news to my children?" She added, "I didn't have anybody with me. When I came back down, I just sort of blurted it out. Sonny was dead and had gone to heaven. I don't know how else you can deliver that kind of news. I don't know how you sugarcoat it. I don't know what the hell you can do." And then the news broke more broadly, first trickling out via rumor, and by the morning, Sonny Bono's death in a skiing accident was on every television program across the country. National media had already camped out several rows deep behind the black iron gates of the Bono estate in Palm Springs. This was the beginning of a second wave of cable news era, building off the momentum from the Persian Gulf War earlier in the decade that had transformed CNN into a powerhouse. Fox News and MSNBC had launched just a few years earlier in 1996, and the upstarts were more than willing to follow the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, in pursuit of the next rating bonanza, like the death of Princess Diana just 4 months earlier in September 1997, and the O.J. Simpson trial back in 95. Plus, Sonny Bono was both an entertainment legend and a prominent political figure at this stage of his career, creating a perfect storm for each cable news outlet to deliver their own spin on his sudden passing.
The funeral itself was a massive affair at the St. Teresa Catholic Church in Palm Springs, featuring an invite list that included people from Sonny's days in Hollywood, as well as his more recent colleagues in the political sphere, including President Clinton's Secretary of the Interior, Bruce Babbitt, former President Gerald Ford, California Governor Pete Wilson, Senator Barbara Boxer, and Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich.
It's interesting to listen to this because this is a different time where I think now in today's sensibilities, we don't give quite as much sort of politicians and celebrities being buddies, maybe looked about, frowned upon a little bit, criticized a little bit. Back then, it was just the way it was.
This was the heyday.
Obviously, Ronald Reagan had been an incredibly successful president in his day. President Bill Clinton had curried favor with celebrities forever. Sonny Bono was one of these guys. He traveled to the White House for every president. He had a relationship with Reagan. Obviously, they shared their political bedfellows, but he also had a relationship with Clinton. And it was just like you saw Sonny was no longer a relevant pop star anymore. He maybe not even a relevant movie guy, but everybody knew him as the mayor of Palm Springs and then a House member. And he was best buddies with everybody in town. He was one of these guys that every politician had remembered growing up and wanted to be near.
He was the kind of guy, and you're right, it was a different era where politics and entertainment were kind of hand in glove.
And he didn't have to apologize for it.
You didn't apologize, exactly. Right. And we didn't roll our eyes at it. It was just sort of the way things worked. Ronald Reagan ascended to the presidency, as you said. And Sonny Bono was really the kind of guy who, whenever you saw him, you'd say, that guy's the mayor of Palm Springs.
Yes.
Even if he wasn't the mayor.
That's right.
You know, he would rise to those actual political stations, but he was so friendly with everyone. And
the guy would walk through town and he'd be shaking hands left and right. He had that Italian sort of air about him, and he just fit he fit the mold perfectly.
Absolutely. But of course, it was Sonny's most famous ex-wife, Cher, who created the most lasting moment from the funeral. Her tearful eulogy was pitch perfect, blending moments of humor with sadness while reminding everyone of her very special connection with Sonny all these years later.
Some people were under the misconception that Son was a short man, but he was heads and tails taller than anyone else. He could see above the tallest people. He had a vision of the future and just how he was going to build it. And his enthusiasm was so great that he just swept everybody along with him. Not that we know where he was going, but we just wanted to be there. There was this section in the Reader's Digest, and it was called The Most Unforgettable Character I've Ever Met. And for me, that person is Sonny Bono. And no matter how long I live or who I meet in my life, that person will always be Son for me.
And what's interesting is there wasn't much rancor between Cher and Mary either at the time. Mary would say that Cher was a, quote, constant source of comfort for me during the grieving process. And Mary even recalled, I invited her to be involved. I invited her to stay with us. I thought it was really important that all of the bad words, all of the bad years became meaningless. Cher's speech at the funeral does really loom large in keeping Sonny's memory alive. Her line that Sonny Bono was, quote, the most unforgettable character she'd ever met in her life really resonates when it comes from someone with such a rich, varied life like Cher. That's what really strikes me about this speech is, you know, Cher is one of the most out there figures, Jason, and the way she speaks so adoringly of Sonny Bono, who they had a bad period after their divorce. It was a nasty divorce at the time. She just loved him. He was like this lovable scamp in her life who she never could fully sort of detach her own persona from.
I think a big part of it was he went on to marry Mary, and she was a real adult. And she wasn't sort of another entertainer looking to just sort of, you know, ride his coattails or be another Cher. She was just
the wife of a politician.
Wife of a politician and a mom to two young kids. So any frigidity between the two of them, any iciness between the two of them was just easily thawed because Mary, by all accounts, was a pretty good person and, a wife of a politician. And then, as we'll talk about in a second, she became pretty important in her own right. Actually, if Cher carried on Sonny's legacy in entertainment, it was Mary Bono who solidified his contributions in the political landscape. After his death, Mary went on to represent her Palm Springs area district as a Republican in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1998 through 2013. She sat on the Energy and Commerce Committees, House Judiciary Committee, and even approved the articles of impeachment against President Bill Clinton, which is sort of interesting, as we said, because Sonny had a relationship and Mary had a relationship with the Clintons. And he was actually one of the people, the president was at the time, who personally called and offered her condolences in the immediate aftermath of Sonny's death. And just as she was the fourth wife of her late husband, Mary herself married and divorced several more times, including brief marriages to a Wyoming businessman in the early 2000s, a 6-year marriage to fellow Congressman Connie Mack that ended in 2015, before finally marrying her fourth husband, former astronaut and retired Navy Rear Admiral Stephen Oswald.
Talking about Sonny without Cher is sort of like talking about Abbott without Costello or Laurel without Hardy or peanut butter without jelly. It just feels incomplete. But I also think simply defining his life and career as some sort of satellite orbiting around such an enormous and unique star like Cher gives short shrift to the extraordinary life Sonny Bono led both before and after his time with her. A life that remains one of the lasting testaments to scrappiness and perseverance in two of the most unforgiving and often cruel industries, entertainment and politics. Salvatore Sonny Bono was born in Detroit to an Italian immigrant father and mother of Italian descent as well. And being the youngest member of the family proved to be really formative in his life. Sonny was relatively short, not blessed with great looks, didn't have a naturally good singing voice, and yet, from a very young age, he was determined to become a force in the music business and had all the scrappiness to pull it off. He began writing songs as a teenager, even penning one track called Coco Joe that would end up being recorded in the 50s and later covered by groups as big as the Righteous Brothers.
Yeah, Coco Joe. Let me tell you about a Coco Joe. Coco Joe. Good little monkey in town.
His big break in the music industry came from working with legendary record producer Phil Spector in the early 60s, serving as a promoter, percussionist, and assistant while earning his stripes. In 1963, he co-wrote the song Needles and Pins, which maybe you've heard, Jason. It became another classic of the era when it was recorded and released by The Searchers. The song was a smash hit, even earning the band time on The Ed Sullivan Show just a couple months after the Beatles' memorable appearance.
Still they thinking needles and pins because of all my pride, the tears I gotta hide. Hey, I thought I was smart, I went hard.
But of course, his biggest break would come from his romantic pursuits when he met and started a relationship with a 16-year-old named Sherilyn Sarkeesian. Cher had dropped out of high school, left her mother's house, and was networking as much as possible with managers and agents in Hollywood to find her big break. Sonny Bono, an ambitious up-and-comer himself, already working with one of the most successful producers in the business, Phil Spector, met Cher in 1962, and it was kismet. Cher almost immediately got to work, singing backup vocals on many famous recordings like the Ronettes' Be My Baby and the Righteous Brothers' You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'. The couple wed in 1964, and the rest is rock and roll history. There's really a popular conception, Derek, in some people's minds that it was Sonny who attached himself to the more talented and beautiful Cher, crafting them as a duo in order to burnish his own fame and celebrity. But the truth is a lot more nuanced than that. I mean, Sonny wanted to launch Cher's career as a solo artist initially, and really as a vehicle to propel his own producing career. Sonny actually had a hit single of his own as a solo artist, a track called Laugh at Me, which hit the top 10 in 1965.
So I don't care, then laugh at me, if that's the fare I have to pay to be free, then baby, laugh at me.
But he spotted Cher's incredible talent, and he really knew that this was something beyond anything that he could do as an artist.
You listen to that song, listen to Laugh
Yeah.
at Me, and you know that he's a songwriter.
That's right.
I mean,
That's
his
right.
voice is iconic in its own way, but you listen to Cher, early Cher, where she's beautiful and lithe, and that voice is incredible. It's clear who the talented half of the team is. And even Sonny would say that many years later.
And I don't want to reduce Cher at all. She's insanely talented. Her beauty at 20-something years old when she first burst onto the scene, incredible. I think that's been lost in time. She's obviously beautiful, but I don't think we remember how rare of a beauty that she was. And Sonny saw this. Here you have an insanely talented young woman who's also insanely beautiful, and he knew that he had something really special. The problem was Cher, if you can believe it, suffered from tremendous stage fright early in her career. So Sonny thought performing as a duo would help bring her out of her shell. You can see it in old footage. Cher often longingly looks at Sonny during their duets, which reads as adoration, but Cher has said that actually it was a way of avoiding having to look at the audience, which might trigger her anxiety.
We think of her as now this out there performer,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the Cher that I grew up with was already in the leather outfits, singing "Do You Believe" and "If I Could Turn Back Time." Thinking of her as suffering from stage fright is hard to believe, but
Don't you
you
think
do
the
look at the
outfits
old
and
videos.
the hair are a distraction?
They're like a mask.
They're a mask for her, so she can have the audience. She, in her own mind, in her own sort of anxiety-riddled mind, she can pretend that people are focused not on her, but on these crazy outfits. And I think that probably plays it. She probably still is that same shy person.
I
Yeah.
think so. Regardless of what made it work, though, you couldn't argue with the results. They immediately began cranking out hits, including the chart-topping "I Got You, Babe" in 1965, heard at the top of this episode, and the top 10 hit "The Beat Goes On," heard here.
And the beat goes on.
You can't really overstate the accomplishments of Sonny and Cher during this period. This was the height, Jason, of Beatlemania. So space on the Billboard charts was hard to come by, with the Fab Four cranking out so many hits. They were dominating the charts, and a few little songs would slip in there. Sonny and Cher were among them. You know, the Supremes would occasionally get up there. You had a Louis Armstrong hit occasionally jump to the top when he made his comeback.
Motown and the Beatles, you obviously have Elvis is still very relevant during this period. It's hard to find. I mean, this is not the maybe 90s when there's more space on the charts, right?
I think this is exactly
the 60s, and the fact they cracked it is pretty incredible.
Pretty impressive. The couple parlayed their success in the studio and quirky married couple chemistry into a very popular variety show at the time called the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, which aired 67 episodes on CBS from 1971 to 1974. And the show was a huge success, and it has become an important piece of pop culture history. All the stars of the day, like Carol Burnett, the Jackson 5, Burt Reynolds, the Supremes, and even a pre-presidential Ronald Reagan appeared on the show. And it was genuinely funny. Future film star Terry Garr was a regular cast member who appeared in sketches, and Steve Martin was actually one of the show's writers. But the show was really propped up during its heyday by the remarkable chemistry of the self-deprecating Sonny and his strikingly beautiful and talented young wife Cher, who would rib him mercilessly with jokes before singing sweet love songs with him on stage. And it all just worked, and many of the jokes actually still feel funny today.
From Television City in Hollywood, ladies and gentlemen, Sonny and Cher.
We always come out here and we always shake hands like that.
Yes.
In fact, why don't we come out and kiss? We never come out and kiss anymore. I mean, we used to be married.
I know, we shook hands a lot then, too.
It's so funny because this is exactly what you were talking about earlier. This assumption that many people made that she's the talented one and he's the hanger-on. And so they create this reality show, and that's the role he plays.
It's exactly, and it is pitch perfect. I mean, it's dated. Look, it's a show from the 70s, but the humor of a married couple griping to each other, that's sort of timeless.
Where she's constantly insulting him and he's sort of taking it on the chin because he's lucky to be married, this famous and beautiful woman, and he's just a little guy.
He's so short and she's so statuesque. It's just very funny to look at. But like their marriage shortly thereafter, the variety show eventually ended, and the couple went through a fairly nasty divorce, with Cher citing involuntary servitude as the reason for the split and accusing Sonny of withholding her fair share of earnings and waging a custody battle over their child. Sonny tried to pick up the pieces of his career in entertainment after she left, releasing the Sonny Comedy Review in the mid-70s, but it only aired for one season on ABC. The couple briefly tabled their disagreements from the acrimonious divorce to perform together on the Sonny and Cher show, but the magic was mostly gone by that point. Cher would go on to become one of the most iconic, multi-talented entertainers of her generation with a slew of solo hits and movie roles, and Sonny was really left to pick up the pieces. He started with a foray into acting, picking up small roles in television series like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Fantasy Island, Charlie's Angels, The Love Boat, and Chips. And from there, he was able to get roles in a few movies, including the campy horror movie Troll, John Waters' iconic 60s-era throwback Hairspray, and a memorable role as the mad airplane bomber Joe Salucci in the highly anticipated sequel to Airplane, Airplane 2, the sequel.
Would everybody move to the lounge who is not carrying a bomb?
Don't move! Mr. Salucci, they know about you back home. Stay where you are! Joe, you don't want to blow that thing and kill all these innocent people?
I don't care about them.
Joe, listen to me. It's hopeless. No one's ever gotten away with a stunt like this before. No one has to know about your problem. No one has to know you're impotent.
Don't say that word!
But the movies and television work served mostly as a prelude to Bono's final act, politics. Sonny first entered the political scene after experiencing some frustration with local government bureaucracy while trying to open a new restaurant in Palm Springs, California, something he talked about during an appearance on David Letterman's talk show.
But why did you want to run for the mayor of the city?
Well, I live in Palm Springs, and our city is a beautiful town. And so I opened a restaurant in Palm Springs, and I go, okay, here I am. And I said, well, I'm going to put up a sign and let them know I'm here. So I go down to the city and say, well, I'm going to put up a sign. They go, no, you can't put up a sign. I go, well, why? And they go, well, because. Yeah. And I go, well, that's a silly reason.
You can hear why a move into politics was a natural fit for Bono. There's a down-to-earth and very relatable charm he has. It's almost a natural warmth. You're drawn to him because he seems like a scrappy fighter, an inherently sensible guy who might share your values, while still benefiting from the enormous fame that came from his long career in Hollywood and the music industry. He served as mayor of Palm Springs from 1988 to 1992, and then successfully transitioned to national politics, winning the congressional seat for California's 44th District in 1994 and winning re-election in 96. He served until his death in 98. Perhaps his most significant contribution while serving in office was pushing for copyright extensions, something he never saw passed in his lifetime, but which eventually became law as the Sonny Bono Copyright Extension Act, which has been derisively referred to as Mickey Mouse Protection Act, given the enormous benefits Disney got from the legislation protecting the rights to its most famous rodent, Mickey Mouse. He also championed restoration of the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is a giant and very salty lake in Southern California that experienced dramatic problems with dead fish and other wildlife from agricultural runoffs, changing its carefully balanced chemistry. Little story, Derek?
Yeah, I would love one, because you're a California born and bred, so you know these
Not only
issues.
that, in the early 2000s, my mom moved down to Palm Springs, and she actually ended up buying a bit of a little investment property down in Salton City. They were, because of the work of Sonny Bono, he was dead by this point, but a few years later, they started this enormous redevelopment. And the idea was to have water again draining naturally into the Salton Sea to become a Dead Sea, literally, and no life was possible there. And so water started to flow in there again, and it was supposed to be this great reclamation project, billions of dollars, totally failed. My mom bought the house for about $100,000, and a few years later sold it for the great profit of about, I think, $40,000 for the resale on it. So
yeah, I mean,
that's
this is a part
the
of
legacy of Sonny Bono to me. No, I'm just kidding. What he tried to do was great. It just didn't work out.
It didn't take, right? The Salton Sea, there was a Salton Sea Reclamation Act that was passed in his honor, but restoring the lake has been a vexing problem, as you've noted.
In fairness, we don't have to get too far into this, but the Salton Sea is not meant to house lives. It was naturally created by earthquakes however long ago, and so some water was trapped there, incredibly salty water, and some life did bloom there, which has been snuffed out by pollution, but it's not a place that is otherwise going to be bucolic. It's going to be stinky.
He did his best. Although he was married 4 times during his too brief life, and his widow Mary has undeniably been responsible for preserving and celebrating many important parts of his legacy, Sonny Bono will forever be linked with his second wife, Cher. The couple was married for just 11 years and certainly traded playful and some not-so-playful barbs in the media for many years after their divorce, but the idea of Sonny and Cher, of a loving married couple ribbing each other with jokes about married life while intermittently making beautiful music together, remains steadfast in the public's imagination. And unlike another famous singing couple that launched an iconic female entertainer after breaking up, Ike and Tina Turner, their story was not filled with the kind of immeasurable pain from years of domestic abuse that led Tina to rise from the ashes and pull off one of the greatest comebacks in music history. To the contrary, the memory of their petty squabbles faded and left only warm feelings and admiration. And so I thought it only fitting to give Cher the final word by sharing another portion of her tearful eulogy in which she describes what made Sonny so special.
Some people thought that Son wasn't very bright, but he was smart enough to take an introverted 16-year-old girl and a scrappy little Italian guy with a bad voice and turn them into the most successful and beloved couple of this generation. And some people thought that Son wasn't to be taken seriously because he allowed himself to be the butt of the jokes on the Sonny and Cher show. What people don't realize is that he created Sonny and Cher, and he knew what was right for us, you know? He just always knew the right thing, and he wanted to make people laugh so much that he had the confidence to be the butt of the joke because he created the joke.